Hi, it's Mike Stevenson. In today's video, we're going to talk about the sample project deployment in the Logic App testing series. Now, the key thing here is you're going to think, right, well, we're talking about unit tests, and why do I need to care too much about deployment? So, what I've tried to do is I want to work towards how do we show you how to run these tests in a DevOps pipeline. What I want to do is I want to create the sample as something that looks a bit like a real world solution rather than just a bunch of hello world samples. So I want to have a pipeline that'll do integration testing and it'll do unit testing. What we'll be able to do is do a deployment with that. So in order to get to that end goal, I want to take a little bit of time to just explain the deployment process of what will happen with the Logic app. And so this video is going to take a slight tangent, and then in a future video we'll come back to something covering a deeper dive on some of these DevOps processes. Okay, so in the Logic app solution, I'm over here in the infrastructure section. So in a coming video, we'll talk about the pipeline folder and we'll talk about the deployments, but I want to go through the bicep setup to begin with. So here in my infrastructure, I've got this bicep file. And what this bicep file basically does is it'll spin up a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to assume that certainly for my test environment, I've already got an app service plan for Logic apps. I don't want to spin up one plan per Logic app or anything like that because that's going to cost a lot of money that I don't want to spend in a demo. And I think actually in the real world, I think my gut feel is most people should be separating the deployment of the app service plan from the deployment of the actual Logic app itself because you want to share the plan between multiple between multiple Logic apps. So here I'm going to deploy things like an app insights, a log analytics. I'm going to deploy the app itself. I've got an existing key vault I'm going to reference. Obviously, the app services exist. And in your scenario, maybe you have a shared app insights, for example, might be one of the things you do. But let's just go through this bicep file. So to begin with, I've got some parameters here I'm going to pass in when I run it. And then the first thing I'm going to do is make a reference to my existing key vault, passing in the key vault resource group and name. So in my case, my key vault is, I think it's in a different resource group from where my Logic app is. Next, I'm going to create a log analytics workspace here, and I'm going to set the retention to fairly minimal for keeping my costs down. I'm then going to create an app insights. Again, same idea, keep the retention down. It's a web type, fairly vanilla app insights setup. It's not VNet connected or anything like that in this case, any of these resources, just for awareness. I'm then going to create a storage account. So this storage account is going to be used by this Logic app. So it's got local redundancy, v2 type, again, fairly vanilla storage account setup. And then we get to the Logic app itself. So here is where the Logic app starts. We're going to have a system assigned identity. It's going to have the kind indicating it's both a function app and a workflow app. I'm going to link it to my app insights here. So I think the tag tells you which app insight it's going to use. I'm then going to specify some app settings here. So we've got our function version, node runtime, node version, app insights connection string. We're passing in details of the storage accounts, the content share, the bundles, and then I'm coming down to some custom properties down at the bottom here. So I've just put a property in just for testing to begin with when I was building the bicep file, but I don't really need that one. But I need ones like the OpenAI. So here I've got the URL for it in Key Vault. So I've got the passing the Key Vault as a Key Vault reference type app setting, so it'll go and read that value at runtime. So I don't need the secret or the URL for my OpenAI inside the Logic app itself. then as we go further down, you'll see there's some other settings, things like Cosmos, storage. There'll be something I'll be doing about Service Bus in a future video. So we've got Service Bus connection string and key vault as well. And then I've got a few output variables at the bottom for my biceps. This is a pretty straightforward bicep setup, creating a few resources here. I've then got some values that I'm going to pass in locally. So you'll see here I've set those values, my name for my storage accounts and so on and so on. Then when I do a deployment for other environments, so if you imagine as a developer, I'm writing this code on my desktop, I'm going to deploy it to an Azure resource group that I'm working it side by side while I'm developing. But then when I do my pipeline deployments and DevOps, I'm going to deploy to other environments. And this is really where this parameters template file comes in. So when I run my pipeline, what I'm basically going to do is these values here, I'm going to replace them with variables from within the pipeline itself. So I'm going to update this file. Then I'm going to do the bicep deployment, and by that point, it'll actually have the real values in this file. So my workflow as a developer is basically, for now, if I'm modifying code on my desktop and I wanted to push it to Azure and deploy it, so the infrastructure side, I'd right click and I'd go deploy bicep file. I'd approve that. So choose my subscription, choose the resource group I'm going to deploy to, and then I choose my parameters file. So I'll choose that local file here. You'll see the console's just updating output there, telling me that it's waiting for the deployment to complete. There we go, and that's my deployment all done. So that was my local bicep deployment. Now, in the next video, we'll look at what the pipelines look like when we do the deployments from the DevOps pipeline. So we'll have to look at how we set the infrastructure up at that point too. Thank you for listening to this video.